in this session, I want just to spend some time looking at the whole issue of time, because obviously on a daily basis I hear, oh, we've found a new fossil, it's along the dinosaurs, it's 65 million years old. 2 days ago I heard about a new type of man that they found in South Africa, 1.2 billion years old. And it was a predecessor of humans, you know, but it was not an ape, but one of the men. They've got a whole raft of them. Obviously, if genetics brought man about, then there was lots of strains, and there's been lots of precursors to mankind, as we know him, Homo sapiens, as we are. So that whole thing is very confusing, and this is creation confidence, okay? And I want you just to have some tools in your own mind for saying, "Ooh, is that really the case?" And when you start analysing it, some of the claims are crazy that are being made about times of certain things. Anyway, the grounds are pretty shaky for those things. So I just want to look at, first of all, at time, okay? And I want to get some perspective on these big numbers, because the Earth, apparently, you know, the cosmos, the Big Bang happened 3.8 billion years ago.
13.8.
13.8 billion years ago.
10 billion.
Okay. So that was it. Just everything exploded from nothing, and then it all started to consolidate into
Something.
planets and stars and things. And the Earth happened 4.5 billion years ago. The Earth consolidated, okay, and then again, I was reading a thing recently, bacteria, and they're thinking that even up to sort of 3.8 billion years ago, life started. So the Earth formed, and then life started on it. I just want to look at numbers for a bit. If we say 1 second is a year, just to get some handle on the size of these numbers, 1,000 seconds is 17 minutes. 1,000,000 seconds is 11.5 days. Not so long to get to 1,000,000, but then we go straight to 1,000,000,000, and we're 32 years of seconds. Okay, 32 years of seconds gets us to 1 billion. Okay, so I've just drawn this pie chart here. Okay, now if we take 32 years as 1 billion, we've got the Earth is 4.5 billion. So I've just approximated it as 120. This is 32 years, 120 years. I'm doing a clock face, okay? So 12 is the top, it's 120. And we've got 30 here, 60, 90, 120. So it's like a clock face, okay? This is our pointer, okay? We've had 180 years of conscious thought. 150 years ago, they started finding fossils on the south coast of England. The first time people started thinking this Earth is really ancient, these fossils, where they started finding fossils.
Like
Again, they knew nothing about. Fossils are so recent, okay? So I'm just saying, let's take 180 years of conscious thought when we've been thinking about these things, like where we've come from. I mean, I'm sure man was thinking about it long before that. Moses was thinking about it, other people were thinking about it. But in terms of the UK and the Western enlightened humanity started 180 years ago thinking about fossils and the whole idea that maybe we come across by chance rather than by God or some, you know, ultimate force. Obviously people were worshipping all sorts of things. 180, which is just 180 years, is 3 minutes. It's 180 seconds. It's 3 minutes. So we've got 3 minutes, okay, in 120 years. We had 3 minutes of consciousness. So mankind, we've looked for 3 minutes.
Can I just clarify? 1 turn of the whole clock is the whole age of the whole Earth.
Yes.
If it's 4 billion years old.
Yeah.
So the whole clock is 4 billion years. Yeah. And we've looked at it for 3
We've looked
seconds.
at 3 minutes, okay, 3 minutes. So we've glanced for 3 minutes in 120 years. That's what we've had. We've
In a lifetime.
3 minutes. The academia of this world is saying, we've looked for 3 minutes and we're going to tell you what's happened for 120 years. Okay? And I'm just putting down there, arrogance of man. Okay? We've got Romans 1 I shared with you last week. And I think that really sums it up, what we're thinking. This is another way of portraying it. We've got a journey that's 140 miles long. It's the same maths. 140 kilometres long, and we, conscious man, this again, the sort of 180 years, is a tenth of a millimetre. So we're going 140 miles, moved a tenth of a millimetre, and we've seen everything, okay? And that is where we're at with deep time. But of course, we're not in deep time. We're in biblical time, because God made this earth, and we are His creation, okay? And He's going to end the earth, and it's a whole plan, okay?
Gonna make it
So
new.
if we've got biblically, we've got the same time frame. The biblical age of the earth is 1 hour 40, okay? And we've got half an hour since Christ at that time, so a third the time Christ came, 2,000 years ago. The earth might be 8,000. Anyway, it's roughly half an hour we've had since Christ came. So we've had the gospel for half an hour of the 1 hour 40. And 1 hour, we've got 1 hour of literature on the earth. They've been writing stuff down, recording stuff, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, the Bible that we have, okay? And the whole hour of 40 we've had an oral tradition, okay? We've got information getting passed on from generation to generation. They were talking to one another, they were communicating with one another. Anyway, those are two models, okay? The biblical model. So we can either work on this, where we've had an oral tradition, we've had an hour of literature, half an hour since Christ came, 1 hour 40 in total, or we're going to have 120 years where we've had just 3 minutes of 120 years, or a tenth of a millimetre in a 140 kilometre journey. Okay, so I just wanted to put that in perspective about just, anyway, I think it's an interesting look how deep time is, how long it is, these figures that we give. Okay, so we're now going to look at dating. So that's just to give you something about time. I'm going to just look at carbon dating. Okay, now carbon dating is produced from basically when we get solar flares, we get cosmic rays coming into our atmosphere. It hits nitrogen and makes and it makes it behave like carbon. Okay, it knocks out, changes in the nucleus, and it combines with oxygen and produces carbon with a carbon with a atomic number of 14 rather than 12. Normal carbon is 12, okay, and it becomes 14, and it's unstable in this state. It's being excited by this cosmic ray hitting it, and it becomes unstable, and gradually, over 5,730 years, half of it will change back to carbon 12, half of it is still carbon 14. So this is happening all the time in the upper atmosphere, okay? And we can measure this quite accurately. It's quite a good science that this is breaking down, the carbon is breaking down. So we've got these carbon molecules. Now they're only a very small percentage of the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. I mean, carbon dioxide is very small in the atmosphere. I think it's about like, it's under 1%, isn't it?
Carbon
dioxide.
Anyway,
carbon
so it's very
dioxide
low.
is 400 parts per billion.
Anyway, it's tiny. And
.04%.
global warming is going from 400 parts per million to 500 parts per million.
Which is 0.0 something percent.
It's tiny percentages. Anyway, and obviously the carbon 14 is even a smaller quantity. So we've got this in the half-life. So I just want to explain about half-lives. So you start off with a product that's radioactive, and within the 5,000 years, half of it's converted back to a stable carbon, and half it's still reactive. So after 2 half-lives, that's 11,000 years, you've got a quarter left. So you have a half left, then a quarter left, then an eighth left, then a 16th left, then a 32th left. And
64,
it becomes, anyway, after
quite quickly.
about 10 half-lives, then any measuring inaccuracies, because you're measuring such small quantities, any measuring inaccuracies become very difficult. You know, if you've got 2% inaccuracy in all your measurements, then when you're only measuring 2%, well, you could be measuring 4%, or you could be measuring nothing, you know,
Yeah.
because of the experimental things. So it's recognised, they recognise that so 10 half-lives is 60,000 years roughly, and you can't really use carbon dating beyond that. So it's used, but anyway, I just want to explain the principle because it's the same principle for all the other radioisotope dating methods, okay? So after about 10 half-lives it becomes immeasurable. So anything that's older than 60,000 years shouldn't have any radioactive carbon in it, carbon-14. It shouldn't be there. And often they're just measuring the ratios between the radioactive stuff and the unradioactive stuff, and they just count the number of leaps with a measuring Geiger counter. And it's all quite good science, and it works quite well. And we'd accept that carbon dating works fairly well. But so anyway, it's like this hour. Anyway, this is supposed to be an hourglass. It's a very bad drawing, but you know, instead of an egg timer where the sand just trickles through, and then you turn it over and it trickles through the other way. Well, anyway, that you have. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about these carbon first, about the carbon levels first. Carbon-14 was first sort of discovered, and the lady, I forget the lady's name, but she got a Nobel Science Prize for her discovery in 1950. She realised this was a dating method and it's quite good, and people applauded her for it. In 1965,
Marie Curie.
Sorry?
Marie Curie?
No, it wasn't. No.
Yeah,
No. Some of them.
Talking about different.
In 1965, the year of my birth, it was double. Carbon-14 was double what it was in 1950 in the atmosphere. Just out of interest, any ideas why that would be?
Industrial Revolution?
No.
Car manufacturing and human
No.
population increase.
Big solar flare.
Nuclear testing in the 50s. Okay,
Makes sense.
nuclear testing made the more of the carbon in the atmosphere be reactive. The explosions in the Americans and the Russians, all the testing that went on in the 50s caused it to double. So that's just interesting. So that massively they have to count that in, because anything that was
It's
since
warped
then
by that.
it took time. Obviously, it's not long. There's not much of it broken down that was produced by nuclear stuff. It's not broken down yet because it takes 5,700 to get to half its level. We've only had 950, 75 years. Okay. 2025, we've got carbon levels rising. So carbon-12 from industrialisation. The carbon that's coming out of that is just carbon-12. It's not carbon-14 from burning products. So we're actually getting increasing levels. So it's actually reducing the ratio. Okay. So little things. I just wanted to point out two
It
realistic
can change, yeah.
things that we can see. We can see in this present day, and we can measure that are affecting carbon dating. We have to mess about with carbon dating. We have to factor these things into carbon dating when we're to try and get accurate things. Okay. So we've got a level of with all the dating methods. Okay, we're using this hourglass model. Okay, so you've got what you start with when it's first formed. It's all parent material. Okay, so the carbon-14 is at whatever percentage is in the atmosphere, and it gradually drains through and turns into carbon-12. Or if it's uranium turning to lead, it's all uranium, and eventually it all becomes lead, and there's a process of it sort of feeding through. Okay, but so you have parent and daughter material. That's what you call the parent material is the carbon-14, and it's turning back to carbon-12. Okay, uranium is turning to lead. There's potassium turns to argon. Lots of different, and they often go through stages. It's a massive change in the atomic weight between some of these longer ones. But the half-life of some of these long ones is like 1.3 billion years
Long.
of half-life.
Yeah.
1.3 billion years. So since 1950, how much of a half-life have we seen of uranium?
1%
Just out of question.
or less.
How much have we been able to measure how it's changed? Not an awful lot, really, have we?
0.0001%.
But anyway, they have methods, but I'm just saying that there's big questions about this. So one of the problems with all these methods, okay, is we don't know the amount of parent material. Nobody was there at the start of the Earth to say that this rock, this fossil-bearing rock that we've aged at with the dinosaurs and it's 65 million years old, we don't know what levels they were at all. We do not know. This, and if you Google, just Google radioisotope dating, they're honest about the problems. It's there. They're honest about the problems. It's all there. I was astounded when I did for this talk. I had to re-look what they're actually saying about it, because I wanted things like to know that it was 1.3 billion years, the half-life of potassium to argon, or whatever. And I just couldn't believe what I was reading. They're all there, the problems. They lay them out. So they don't know the parent material. They don't know if the decay rate is constant. Okay, we've got this.
Things
This
affecting
is
the decay
flexing.
rate.
We're saying just with carbon. We're looking at carbon. It's varying, but it's the same for all these others. We don't know if the rate is constant. It appears to be pretty constant, but we've only looked. So we've only been consciously looking at these things. We don't know what a global. We don't know what if the flood happened or if
Or
a
a
meteorite
volcano.
that hit and killed off all the dinosaurs. But we don't know what these sort of effects had. Have we had lots of magnetic shifts and things? The scientists are all saying we have had. Have this had any effect on radioactivity? They're finding that cosmic rays are having effect on
The radioisotope
the
dating.
radioisotope dating things.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's lots of quandaries. We don't know that the rate is constant. We're assuming it is. So we're assuming we know the parent material. We know where it started. We're assuming that it's constant. Is the system closed? Okay. If, say this is running through and then I'm adding more sand in the top, then this is accurately going to tell the time. But we say we don't know what time we started at. We only use an hour clock to tell us a certain amount of time. And also if we're adding more in, it's going to appear that it's going to run for longer.
Yeah.
Okay, so how in the rock stratas, okay, we've got these, obviously most of the rocks silicon and other things, but then we've got these isotopes that we're actually measuring the age of the rock. We don't know if more is coming in or the parent is disappearing. And things like metamorphic rock undergo intense heat and pressure, and that some of these things they can see that they diffuse out. There's some of the daughter material diffuses out of the rock as it's changing. It diffuses. So it's just anyway. There's some massive questions about: is the system closed? Is the one of these things becomes soluble in water? One of the things, and it flows out, and all rock there's water moving through it the whole time.
Underground, yeah.
So we don't know. The system is not really closed. But for any dating thing like this, we're going to have a closed system. I've mentioned the sort of flood catastrophe. Magnetic field. Anyway, this relates to the carbon. Certainly relates to carbon because we're saying that it's solar flares and cosmic rays from the sun that cause carbon-14 to be made in the first place. Now, if our magnetic most cosmic rays are deflected, otherwise we would seriously get more cancers and skin cancers and one thing and another. We're protected a lot from cosmic rays because they just go round the Earth because the magnetism just drives them, and we miss the rays. They go round, they get diverted off the Earth. And if we at the minute, the scientists are all saying we've got a massively weakening. It's a known fact. We've got a weakening magnetic field on the Earth, and it might reverse and all sorts of things. So we've got this weakening field. So we're now probably getting more carbon-14 than we did when we had a stronger magnetic field. More carbon-14 created. So I'm just saying there's massive anomalies with carbon-14. Okay. Anyway, how do we actually date with them? We something that was 5,000 years old would have just half the radioactive carbon in it that something today.
Yeah.
Basically, it's only for carbon-14 is only for biological things. So it's things that are taking in atmospheric carbon.
dioxide.
So it's leaves.
Plants.
Plants are taking it in initially through photosynthesis, and it's becoming part of a plant. Then we eat the plants, or
And animals.
cattle eat the plants. They have some radioactive. We're all radioactive, sadly. We've got some radioactive carbon in us, and so when we die, our bones are still giving out, breaking down the carbon, And so they can look at if I was being dead for 5,000 years, they can look at me and say he's been dead 5,000 years because he's got half the radioactive carbon in him that he had. So that's again how to explain really how they actually use it to tell. But, and
But
I
they
said,
still don't know if anything's changed in that 5,000 years.
No.
So it's still a guess.
that's it.
Yeah.
So we've got the carbon-14. So that's how it becomes a dating method. They're measuring, and they can measure accurately, but they can measure fairly accurately,
So
but
a
we
couple
don't
of
know
thousand years.
these things and the massive assumptions that are made with these things. And this is carbon, which is relatively simple compared with the other ones, which got massive half-lives. Okay. Okay, I've just got here. It's a very precise science. Okay, but it's not. It's got very precise equipment, but it's not accurate. Okay, and they have lots of different methods, and they will they use the different methods to. If you use different methods to sample the same rock source, if you want to know the date of a rock, then they use these isotope dating methods, and they come up with different figures. They can't just use one, and they often come up with different figures. And there's a lot of selection of dates. So often, I had a friend who was an archaeologist, and they have to put it on, what sort of date they're expecting, and then they can confirm that it's somewhere like that. If they get one or two, so they do 10 readings, and they get 2 that are near that, and say, oh yeah, it's that because we've got 2 out of 10 who was telling us that. And others, and they're completely all over the place, a lot of the dating, because it's really hard to do the measuring of these things. So a lot of these, because I say this, if you've got a half-life of 1.3 billion years, how much have you lost? I mean, how accurately have you got to measure to see, okay, it's sending out so many bleeps, 100 bleeps a second, and then in 1.3 billion years, it's sending out 50 bleeps per second, okay? So in 100, since 100 years since we've been looking at, 75 years since we've been able to measure these things, if
It's
1.3 billion years,
99.999.
it's like we were measuring 100 bleeps per second, now we're measuring 99.5 bleeps per second. And our machines aren't accurate enough to measure it. So it just becomes absolutely ridiculous, some of the stuff. So the way they've got the dates of these things is that a lot of it, they say that they've taken the geological side, because partly I was questioning earlier that I said it was biology that's given us these long dates because they needed to get evolution. And geology and biology, but geology said, yeah, that's possible. Biology said, look, we need masses of time. Time is our friend. We need masses of time for evolution to happen on this earth, okay? And geology said, oh yeah, we can give you loads
we'll
of
stretch
time.
it a
Everything's slow and steady and uniformitarianism, and that's allowed them to anyway. The time is their friend, because if they have long enough, anything can happen supposedly, okay? But the main thing is, hopefully that James is going to touch on this next week. He's looking at the biology side, looking at evolution and more of the biology. But one of the biggest problems is that, the goo to you theory, which is what they have is that we had a muddy pond and that some lightning hit it and there was some energy put in, and the first cells, amino acids and things were created, and that hopefully the first cells synthesized themselves from that. And the trouble is that things like amino acids, time is not their friend, because amino acids break down. They break down after, they might last a month in the pool, but some of the other things, some of the other important factors, they only last for hours. If they happen to be created by lightning, within an hour or two they'd be gone. Some of the cell is so complex, and they need all these factors. We're going to hear from James, I'm sure, next week, and we're in the groups. It is so complex. It is a factory. It is the most simple cell is like New York City. That's a comparison.
Yeah.
Anyway,
much better than that.
Sorry?
Much better than that.
Yeah, anyway, it's information. So this is just happening by chance. And when Darwin, we've got to forgive Darwin, he, when he first postulated this, you know, they were in ignorance. They
They
didn't
didn't
know, and it seemed like a reasonable theory. And again, it wasn't widely accepted, but you know, it's just been taken on by academia. This crazy notion, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, my opinion. What is it? But anyway, all I say is we can really question this. There's some horrible assumptions made. Yeah, so the way they do a lot of the calculating is that they'll find a fossil and they'll say, well, that fossil it's a dinosaur fossil, it's 65 million years old. Oh, and the amount of bleeps we're getting on our thing is,
Bleepometer.
on our bleepometer is 52. And then they'll say, okay, so that is 65 million years is 52 on our potassium scale. Then they'll go to another part of the world and find, oh, we've got a 52 here. So that means it's 65 million years old. They basically have, a lot of the aging is done by just a comparison.
Comparison with other apparently accurate results.
That's it. Of known age material, okay? But the known age, it's all just assumption. Again, they have not got a clue what the starting levels were of the radioactive materials in the rocks. It's just totally bad science as far as I can see. And you know, I was good at science, supposedly. Anyway, other methods. Yeah, so they did the known age, metamorphic changes. So again, the changes in rocks. A lot of the rocks are there. Obviously, the sedimentary rocks are less changed, but the metamorphic rocks, then sedimentary rocks are being laid down under water, and they've got water seeping through them, and you know, so there's leaching questions about the whole method. Other methods of dating, just to give some comparison. Okay, if we look at there's lots of others like the erosion of the earth. Okay,
Yeah.
If if we just look today and see how fast things are eroding, so how fast the deltas are filling up off the Amazon basin, blowing out to see all that dirty water that's going out there, how much the
close that would be where fossil hunt, like
how
they're
much,
doing meters
how much
a year.
water goes down the Jed when there's a flood, and how brown it is and horrible, is that the earth would just be eroded flat within 100,000 years. There'd be nothing left. The America would everything would just be flat by now. The erosion rates are happening. Let me just try and get this, because it was an astonishing statistic I had.
Sedimentation in the sea.
I think
as well.
6 mil every
6 mil on average.
on every 10. I need my glasses. Anyway, the erosion. I wanted to touch on it tonight, but it was interesting. Essentially, the stats. It's a bit like this. The one I had on we've travelled 10 mil in 140 millimetre. If the mountains, I mean, it sounded like every 10 years they're losing 6 mil or something. But then, you know, by the time you get the billions of years, it's like 100 miles of hill has disappeared, and we've still got Everest standing up at 29,000 feet.
Yeah, bits like Everest are still growing.
You could talk about some.
But
Yeah.
stuff like the Scottish
Anyway,
hills, the Scottish hills would be flat.
Yeah. The erosion on the Earth would point to a younger Earth than what they're saying. We're not saying that, you know, that's it. The salination of the seas, okay, the rate that it's salinating, we can say, well, we're polluting it and causing things, but if you imagine after the flood, they didn't have a flood, but anyway, the salination of the seas, that's the salts that come out of the Earth, that have dissolved and gone into the seas. It's getting saltier so fast.
But it should be a
in
lot more
comparison.
salty.
It should be a lot more salty. You know, it should be much. So there are other methods, and you see, before 1850, these methods were respected. Things like erosion and things like the salting of the sea. Oh, come on, give me some of the. There's loads of. Let's see if I can-
Kelvin, if it started as a ball of magma, which again is an assumption, but like if the Earth is cooling down
Heat of
and
the
the
Earth.
crust is becoming solid, I think he thought it was like 25,000 years or something, which is a lot closer to the.
There's something about the rate that the moon is receding from the Earth as well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, people say the moon is gradually sort of drifting away from the Earth, so that's going to affect like rising sea levels, coastal.
But currently it is moving away from the Earth. If you then translate that back to 3 billion years, whenever the moon was supposedly blasted off the side of the Earth, which is what they believe.
What, seriously?
No, it
Yep.
was blasted. The Earth and another planet crashed into each other, and the Moon is part of the other planet.
Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's pretty far-fetched. But how the Moon is drifting away, if you translate that back, it should be super far away now, like gone.
And yeah, we can send a rocket to it.
Yeah.
Or more particularly, if you track it back,
It would be touching the Earth.
it would have,
Yeah.
within a
True.
billion
Yes.
years, it would have been touching the Earth.
So where
or
it
we'd
is
have
now,
had
if you track
such
it back.
big tsunamis around the world, or tides. Sorry.
Maybe it was closer during the flood.
Well, it was, but
Yeah, well,
But how
like,
much?
There's
Not much.
like all the stuff about astrology. That's all because we're getting light from so far away. Apparently, it's like that light set off a billion years ago and is now hitting us.
Yeah, it's
Um,
distant starlight. There's another hell top.
Yeah.
There's that, but then there's also people saying,
James Webb is proving that wrong now. James Webb
Okay.
telescope.
Absolutely.
They're
well,
finding old, fully formed galaxies as far as they can possibly look away with James Webb telescope.
Yeah.
Fully formed, mature galaxies
We're
where
supposed
they
to be
think they
seeing
should see the
Immature
immature
things.
beginnings of
What they're
life.
seeing is everything is formed fully. That's what
Everything
James Webb.
is
That's
already-
the
yeah, but
biggest
he's still saying
discovery
it's billions and billions of light years away,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
huge amounts of
That's
time.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
But-
God flung
but
us down
time-
to space.
time
We're
and
not.
space-
We're not disputing that
Yeah.
it was done. God had he was very good at throwing.
Can they see into the
So it's
future
not-
with that?
With James Webb, they only look back.
Yeah.
But they think they're looking back.
I thought it was really
Yeah.
interesting on your time thing,
Yeah.
because thinking about if we believe that God is like eternal, and that
Mhm.
actually it's almost like the opposite way round, that
Mhm.
we potentially need to start seeing our lives. We're here for humans are here for 8,000 years, but we're going to live forever with God.
Mhm.
Like, so it's like that 4 billion years or something that people
Mhm.
think is in the past
Mhm.
to get here is actually that's coming,
Yeah.
but even more.
38 billion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eternity,
Um,
eternity billion.
Mhm.
Eternity.
Anyway, just about the other dating methods to get back onto the talk. And the
Uranium lead one. Have you got the
yeah.
helium leakage? That's a good one.
yeah, I haven't got
Yeah,
that one
okay.
today. So other methods. I say till 1850, it was accepted. The biblical story was accepted by scientists. So people like Newton, all these people, they all believed it. They all believed that was a great, origin story. And it was only since then we think. And there's other things. I mean, like the Salt Southern Ocean I've got here. It's 62 million years. Okay, that they think potentially the Earth could have been around for it to get a salinated. So it's not a great argument for my case of a young Earth, but it is in comparison. It's 1,000 times shorter than the 4.5 billion years that people are saying. So Salt Southern Ocean is 1,000 times shorter. So I'm just saying there's some questions about this long Earth. Continental erosion, it's 6 mil in every 100 years coming off the hilltops. I thought, oh, that's terrible, that's a tiny amount, that's never going to do anything. But then 2.5 billion years is 150 kilometres of erosion. These numbers are so big. That's 150 kilometres of erosion at 6 millimetres every 100 years. It's crazy stuff. So it's just things like that blow my mind.
The UK is gone.
Supernovas, okay. So we've got this is the distant starlight, some of the stuff we're seeing. We know we've seen 1 or 2 supernovas within, intelligent humanities when we've been looking at them, time. And they basically haven't, the supernova, anyway, they haven't expanded enough. If they're as old as what they say, they just aren't big enough. They're still, they haven't expanded, unlike the universe which has expanded. These exploding stars have not been, they're all young. All the supernovas that we can see in the galaxies are all young. They're all under 10,000 years old. Because they haven't expanded enough. We can see the ones we saw, we can see them expanding. But they're all young, the supernovas. That's it. When a star dies, explodes and dies, which is very interesting. The Earth's magnetic field is decaying. And anyway, there's things saying that
There will be no Earth magnetic field left. Well, the magnetic
That's
field
it.
previously will be so strong that
anyway,
something bad would happen.
they think, and one of the other things I haven't mentioned is that with the carbon dating is that these ancient things that like these fossil bones. He's got a fossil. He's been telling us about a fossil that's got
Oil leaking out of it.
oil leaking out of
Right,
it.
you
And
can
it's got
carbon date
well, it's
that.
got elastic. The dinosaur
Soft
bones that
tissue,
they're
yeah.
finding that have
Yeah.
got soft tissues in them. they've all got carbon-14 in them, okay? Which means they're under 60,000 years old.
But obviously they don't want to test for that.
They
Because
don't
they don't
test
want
for
to
that
find
because
it.
they're testing with it. But if they do test for it, they find it there, and it shouldn't be there.
Does oil have
So they
carbon
just-
14 in it?
I think
sure.
I
Yes.
think it's worth sort of
Oil.
saying it's not so much that there's a conspiracy that
Yeah.
they don't want to test for it,
Yeah.
but if your mentality
Yeah.
is that I've just dug up a dinosaur fossil, it's going to be 50 million years old, it won't have any carbon-14 left in it, there's no point testing it,
Yeah.
so they don't.
Yeah.
They're making the evidence fit the theory, not the theory fit the evidence.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's not that they're kind of deliberately lying.
No,
They're just kind
they
of
just
living
keep
within
lying.
their thing. No one had tested until creation organisations. No one had tested
Yeah.
diamonds. No one had tested
Diamonds
coal
are carbon-14,
because they
yeah.
kind of go. Everyone knows
Yeah.
that these are billions of years, so there won't be any.
Mm.
So there's no point testing it.
Mhm.
And when they did test it, they have tested things like that, and they found carbon-14. They've said, "Oh, well, that must be contamination." They're just living within their own paradigm. It's not that there's a conspiracy and everyone's going, "We all know the creationists are right. Let's lie." They're not doing that. They're just kind of living within their own paradigm and understanding that if we had just seen what they had seen
Yeah.
and been indoctrinated the way they have been indoctrinated, and we need to be careful we're not being indoctrinated, we would have probably believed what they do.
Yeah. And we did.
And it's
did.
just
But it-
it's an education
I
system.
was, you know, an evolution. I was a
Theistic.
theistic evolutionist. I grew up and I did science, and I was happy with that, content with that. But then, you know, I just feel it is a massive issue. I'm no longer. I am very much a short Earth creationist these days. I'm not. I believe God created everything today. You know, in the 7 days even, which is a different to James. But anyway, there we are.
But it's interesting, like, it's so interesting what you say about the arrogance when it's 4 billion years. But it's even arrogant to say that we know exactly, although God's given us some good head start. It, like, there's even an element of arrogance of man in thinking we know what happened in, like, I can't remember what the biblical timescale is, but looking back.
Yeah, but it's
10,000
arrogant. It's
years.
arrogant to believe what's written by the inspired word of God.
I think it's arrogant to know all the details.
No, exactly. We don't know all these.
We do know the details,
We
but-
can rely on the Bible.
And science
Yeah,
is
no, I
telling us.
agree.
Science is telling us there's great lumps of earth underneath in the crust.
Mhm.
You know, again, that's something that's coming in my feed quite
There's
regularly,
cold
but
crust. There's cold crust
lying
deep
there.
within the
Hasn't
hot
got
magma. So
hasn't
the
got
cold crust,
dissolved.
if it's been there for millions of years,
Yeah, but
it
how
should
do
have
you-
warmed up by
Yeah,
now.
but even that, how do you know? You've not been down and
No,
seen
because
it.
the
They're saying
seismography,
it, they're
the
saying it,
seismography
they're
shows
saying
it.
Yeah.
Which is done by proper scientists, not by me.
Not to mention you wouldn't survive all that hot magma.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Anyway, there we go.
Any other questions?
I feel very dumb between all of you. You sound like professors.
I think so.
Well, there's lots of material you can start learning, start
Yeah.
studying.
And it is, it's one
It's
of those things,
fascinating.
it's
Once you start,
interesting.
and once you start digging, then you just keep. There's so many rabbit trails, and whatever interests you, whether it is more like the human history and the archaeology, or if it's the geology, the physics, and chemistry, biology. There's all these different routes. Yeah.
So did you study any of this?
I did study biology and had to do evolution and genetics module, which was not very. I just wasn't very inspired. But at that point, I was definitely a creationist, but I wasn't nearly as up to speed with it. I knew I didn't believe what I was writing, but I had to just write stuff to try and get through my pass. It was that was my worst module out of all the modules. I just didn't have the heart to try very hard.
David, were you a professor
No.
Granddad,
in your previous life?
Dad's dad. Dad's dad was a doctor.
There's a lot.
The doctor.
No, it's not too many academics in the Anderson family. But
It's the
we're
sons.
practical, people of the land.
My
people
question
who work
would be
with their hand.
like this sort of chat is very different to academia. Like you're saying that academia is getting it
I'll send
monumentally
you all, I'll
wrong.
send you all the links.
Yeah, because
Right.
right.
Have some film quite
Yeah,
regularly.
just to say it. So like there's a whole. It's like a complete paradigm. Think of Edinburgh Uni. The amount of people doing PhDs in geology, PhDs in evolutionary biology, PhDs in loads of stuff that's in I did outdoor and environmental education, which is like not even linked to this, and all this was taught the deep time stuff, like very clearly. We went to Siccar Point and saw where James Hutton started his theological, his theory of deep time geologically. And so it is, you're totally right, it's a total worldview that I don't agree with. But it's like, what I find so difficult is you're speaking such a different language there. Like, when you said, not to be too critical, but when you were saying about the erosion, and you were like, oh, that's not going to look very good for my theory. Like, academia actually does, maybe some do, but that's not what academia is about. They're not going out there necessarily to look, like, they're trying to be as objective as possible, and they're super skeptical in that you have to prove it within certain, and obviously, a lot of these things, you're right, they'll lay out all the problems with it, and then they'll still theorise
You're only in
things.
one little field. You know,
Yeah,
you're
they're not looking at
so
everything
special.
necessarily.
They're always looking for a solution to their original mindset. and
Yeah.
theory, you
But
know.
it's
We've got to
It
say
is interesting
Satan has a hand in this.
Yeah.
Satan wants us to deny God. It's quite big. I mean, Romans 1, the passage I read, it's about us denying the sovereignty of God. And it's right at the heart of the fall of mankind, about knowledge and you know, I see it, you know, having, you know, say it's been a spiritual passion of mine for about 7 years now. I've been reading creation stuff alongside, and it's given me more, you know, spiritual insights, you know, and filled my spirit. I've felt more spiritually alive by understanding some of this stuff, and become more aware of, you know, of what I believe is going on, and seeing the work of, and you know, it is, you know, I know guys my generation, it's holding loads of them away because they hear this stuff the whole time, and it's just ridiculous to believe in a creator God. It is ridiculous. So, you know, that's why we're running this course, because I want at least Christians to feel confident that there are answers, and there are answers in every field. You're going to hear the biology side next week, and we haven't decided in the last talk, but we'll decide tonight what we're going to give as the second talk next week. We'll probably do some other stuff later, you know, maybe in a different
Yeah, we've got
format.
more questions, whatever.
We're, you know, at another time, but.
So today we've done 2 talks. Next week I'll do 1 talk on the biology. In a sense, that the question is, is there another subject or other things that people particularly want to explore? Because I mean, there's all sorts of things which we could do.
Who's got a burning question and is happy to
We
come
could
back
probably
next
do
week?
2. We could probably do 2 on the biology, because it is the
Well, yeah.
it is the thing. So you could do, you know, we could, one of us could do another one on biology, a different aspect of biology. But that might, because it is a massive topic, and evolution is the holy grail of the denial of God. You know, the way the sediments are laid down isn't the thing.
For some people.
Where life.
For some people.
Well,
For a lot of people.
For
And for
a lot of people.
vast phase of academia.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that also believe, not me even,
Yeah.
but I'm just pointing out there's a lot of people like you used to be that were able to worship God and know that they were created by Him and believe that He did it through evolution.
Yeah.
And they might be wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah,
it's not
we might be
necessarily,
wrong.
for them it's not the Holy Grail.
There's a lot of
of-
people that turning their nose up at Christianity and think we're a bunch
Yeah,
of bonkers
that's true.
because
If you
we
can't
haven't got
believe-
answers.
yeah.
We haven't got answers to this stuff, and think we're some, and you know that's.
Yeah.
And also, if you can't believe the Bible in the first page, then why believe the rest of the Bible that what Jesus said?
I
Like,
think
it does undermine things if you.
I'm
throw
with
out
the
Genesis.
fundamentalists.
Yeah.
Okay. But seldom Genesis, God created on that day, on that day, on that day. And we're told God created man. It wasn't an evolutionary thing. When God said, "I'll create the animals," it happened. You know, let there be light, and there was light. It just wasn't going over eons of time. Therefore, I don't have a problem in, you know, saying God created me. And that's the problem I have with evolution, because it just doesn't fit in with us.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's why, you know, looking at carbon data or the methods of data is so important, and to look at the flaws in it, because people just assume that what scientists are saying to them is correct, you know, without actually even looking into it. And that's the problem, you know, like
Yeah.
Oh, he's got a PhD.
people will look at their textbooks and assume that everything that's in them is correct, whereas
Yeah.
even the textbooks they use now, half of the stuff's out of date, but they'll still use the same diagrams and all the rest of it to teach people. And I think the issue is the questioning. You know, it's good for Christians to actually say, or to know about this stuff in the first place, but to actually challenge what
Yeah.
people are being taught.
So what are you basing that on? Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, it's actually historically there was the spread of Christianity that brought the spread of science,
Yeah.
and it's Christians who kind of go, I will question this, I will question this, and I think the Bible tells us, you know, we're to worship the Lord with all our minds as well as our heart and our soul. It should be the Christians that are questioning. I mean, there's a tendency within academia, either you're in a very narrow field and you're looking at this particular
puts out in this
thing. I was talking to someone who's doing Old Testament stuff, and remember last week I talked about the Toldot. These are the generations of, and he had accepted the documentary hypothesis, but he's studying a little bit of Lamentations. It doesn't come into it, but well, the truth is somewhere out there, and the biologists will kind of go, well, if they're studying genetics, and they're going to go, well, the genetics doesn't really cover it, but we know that the fossils show evolution. And the folks who are studying fossils will go, well, it's not really in the right order and all the rest, but we know that the genetics, and that's kind of the way that it works. And I think understanding, that no one's really setting out to lie, but as Christians we should be questioning this and questioning this and questioning this. And I think, there's a temptation, and I would kind of, in a sense, push back a wee bit on saying the Bible says it, therefore it must be true, because you kind of go, well, the story of Job was that a parable? Jesus told parables, or did it actually happen? The creation story, it teaches us theological points, but did it actually happen? And that's me and David. You said we disagree. I don't think we necessarily do. It could well be within 6,000 years, but I know that the days, day 1, 2, 3, and 4. A day is defined as a period of light followed by a period of darkness. That's God's dictionary. He called the day the light day and the darkness night. And the sun wasn't around, so they could be longer. So I'm not going to be adamant on that. And I think it's just, we should be questioning this. The Bereans were commended, and he says, you go and test the scripture and see what's true. And we should be testing the world and seeing what's true, because it's been the Christians that have always pushed. They are the forefront of all the sciences. Yeah. J. Warner Wallace does a wonderful thing. He's done an analysis of the fathers of every science, micro areas, and they're 98% or something like that Christians.
There's still loads of scientists, and these creation scientists, they're all got PhDs and doctorates, and they're all very clever, recognised people in their fields. And we've been off to the creation conference. There's conferences happening. It's a global movement, and I think it's gaining momentum because people
are searching for
answers
truth.
because it's not the truth. They're peddling something that's not the truth in evolution, and they themselves
fall apart, aren't
they?
And since COVID, people have just decided, actually, I don't necessarily trust what the scientists are telling me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and start looking at some of this stuff myself. Because COVID was so yeah, do this, do that, do this, do the opposite.
Well, the scientists were all saying opposite.
Scientists were
So
saying
the first
opposite.
time, well, science can say this and science can say that.
So science
It's all
can be wrong. You know, yeah.
What paradigm
So
is
it's
that?
Sometimes
breaking
when
it
it
up
comes
a
to
bit.
science, is a lot of people seem to have a misunderstanding when scientists use the word theory.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, these are all theories, and yes, they
Yeah.
have evidence to support the theory, but things can come up which then turns the theory on the head and puts it in a new different direction.
Yeah.
And like with COVID, is a lot of people, they want to look to scientists as almost godlike in the sense of, okay, you said this, we should do this, but the scientists can only work with what they know, which is very limited. So it's not really that surprising that sometimes things can change so much, because when they find something new, then okay, that theory is shot, so we need to now come up with something else. But there's a lot of people that think, oh, well then they don't know what they're doing. It's like, no, they still know what they're doing, there's so much more they don't know,
Yeah.
that you should never take any theory as 100% fact, unless you have seen it with your own eyes and can prove it repeatedly.
And if you go into a court case, you will get scientific experts on both sides of a case. And
Right, yeah.
scientists are not are prone, if they're being paid to come up with an answer,
Yeah.
they're more likely to come up with that answer. If you ask them to prove that your client is innocent, they will come up with the evidence to prove your client innocent.
Well,
And it's not that they're not, they're just
It's like I was
confirmation
saying about
bias.
making the evidence fit the theory. It's not that they're lying, it's just when you've only got so many pieces of a puzzle and you don't know how it's supposed to be put together, there could be multiple ways for it to be put together that all of them could make sense.
I mean,
I
if you
suppose they're blinded in a way, because obviously as Christians, you know, our eyes are open to an alternative answer, a correct answer, whereas, you know, people that are not born again, don't know God, you know, they have a blindness, you know, they're trying to grasp to the, yeah, well, I should say, only what they know, you know, and they're trying to fit the world or understand the world according to what they know and not God's view, you know.
So it's always the mavericks who change the paradigms. And if you, I mean, at the moment, you know, if you get a lot of funding to investigate how global warming is affecting these population of toads, you're not going to turn around and say there's no global warming and there's no effect. You know, that's what you end up looking at.
And it's interesting to talk about paradigm shifts because like on Netflix, there's 2 series now of Graham Hancock who's getting really popular, and he's basically saying like human civilization. He's not really talking about it when the world began, but he's talking human civilization restarted after a major catastrophe, and he talks about like having amnesia, that we've forgotten the catastrophe, essentially forgotten the global flood. And he basically goes through all of the like different cultures that talk about the global flood, and he's always talking about how catastrophic it was. And he's talking about like 12,000 years ago, which is a lot closer to the biblical time scale than the billions of years. But I think he's like a maverick person, like you're saying. That's probably
people would call him a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of good points, and a lot of interesting things to think about.
Yeah.
And things to dig deeper on.
Germ theory was revolutionary.
Initially.
Anyway, there we go.
Very good.
Better that your way.
Thank you very much, guys.
So biology next week. There we go.
If you've got any other questions, just